Well, you met me earlier today as Cecile Andrews, or my attempt to be Cecile Andrews. For the moment, for a very brief moment, I'll say that I'm Rebecca Gould, and I teach at Middlebury College, and I have the privilege of teaching jointly in a religion department and in an environmental studies program. And sometimes when I tell people that, they look at me funny. They have no idea how these things would possibly go together. But I have this feeling that in this audience, I don't really have to explain, that people would understand that there are some inherent connections between religion, spirituality, and the environment, both in institutional religion and out. I'm just going to move these mics that are in my way, but I don't think that'll hurt. Okay, so now we were talking about Krista Tippett, and I'm so glad you brought her up, Kathy, because I'm just a complete Krista Tippett fan. And in thinking about the remarks I was going to share with you today, I basically decided I wanted to be Krista Tippett live. And so what I did is I started asking questions of people who I had a feeling would want to respond, would actually gain something personally by responding, that had to do with time, famine, and overwork and spirituality. So a lot of what you're going to hear from me is not my voice, but their voices. And I'm very happy about that because I can go on and on if I have to, and most professors do. But what I really wanted was to mostly bring these voices to light, do a little interpretation, but really have them speak for themselves. The larger project I'm doing, this is kind of a window into a book project that I hope will be really focusing on this issue of overwork, not talking about vacation only, but overwork and the price that we pay spiritually, and exploring the way that cashes out in various people's religious traditions, whether spiritual but not religious, which is a lot of people I talk to, or people who firmly identify in Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or other modes. I really like to usually be conversational when I give a talk and kind of do some back and forth. There is one audience participation moment I'll warn you about. But in general, today I'm going to read text a little bit more than I would like to, so I just thought I'd tell you that in terms of wanting to get the precise flow of the words of the people that I spoke with, as well as occasionally the precise flow of my words. So if you see me focused on the text, it's intentional, and I hope you'll forgive me that I'm not doing as much back and forth as I'd like to do sometimes. So I want to begin with a story that is a little bit older than the ones that I'm sharing through the rest of the paper. And this story is told back in the mid-19th century, told by someone who advocated at the time doing nothing and was working against the conventional culture that included early materialism, early advertising, industrial growth, and so on. There were times I could not afford to sacrifice the bloom of the present moment to any work, whether of the head or the hands. I love a broad margin to my life. Sometimes in a summer morning, having taken my accustomed bath, I sat in my sunny doorway from sunrise until noon, wrapped in a reverie, amidst the pines and hickories and sumacs, in undisturbed solitude and stillness, until by the noise of some traveler's wagon, I was reminded of the lapse of time. I grew in those seasons like corn in the night, and they were far better than any work of the hands would have been. They were not time subtracted from my life, but so much over and above my usual allowance. For the most part, I minded not how the hours went. The day advanced as if to light some work of mine. It was morning, and lo, now it is evening, and nothing memorable is accomplished. So here's the audience participation moment. That was? Yes, Thoreau. Excellent. Smart people here. And one thing that one doesn't necessarily catch is he's playing at the end here on the book of Genesis. So he says it's evening and it's morning and evening, so he's doing it backwards, and nothing memorable is accomplished, where, of course, the creation story, a lot gets accomplished. So he's kind of sort of pointing his finger at that kind of productivity. So now the second voice I want you to hear is the voice of an ordained Methodist minister, Reverend C.J., and she's in her 40s, and she led a congregation for about 10 years, raised 3 children, and then went on to doctoral work and is now a member of the professoriate, but she's still doing a lot of chaplaincy work and preaching and so on. And here's CJ talking about her struggles to maintain a contemplative life. When I was in parish ministry, I had a prayer corner in my office. It consisted of a couple of chairs, a table, a candle, icon, my journal, and whatever devotional material I was using. My secretary knew to give me 30 to 60 minutes every morning so I could have my time for prayer and journaling. Sign me up for that secretary. It was rich, very rich. This was important time that did not always come easily. I'm told it takes 6 to 8 weeks to develop a habit. I did it then because it was my job. Parishioners told me, of course it's easy for you, it's your job. We're lucky if we get to read a few lines of the Bible while we're sitting on the toilet. I thought then that all they needed to do was carve out the time and cultivate the habit. Ha! I have been out of parish life for 10 years now. Ask me about my devotional life now. So it's important to notice in Reverend CJ's comments the assumptions she originally made about her parishioners, which is if they could only sort of put the will and the force and the time into it, they could kind of make it happen. They could make contemplative life happen. But CJ then goes on to basically laugh at herself as she recognizes the extent to which structural forces, her studies, child rearing, ad hoc ministering, and the lack of a job requirement for contemplation, all these things conspire to make it nearly impossible to pursue daily spiritual practice that most of us might think would be easy for clergy to do. And there's something that just pulled on my heartstrings to hear her talk about how she, as a minister, could not find time for her own contemplative practice. So here we hear CJ a little bit more. So those are my thoughts on spirituality in a busy life. But this comes because I've thought about my busy life and how important it is to reclaim my time. How do we help people do that? I had a friend who was ordained back in the late 80s, and recently in his sermon to new ordinands, he told them they were not in ministry if they were not working 80 hours a week. How nuts is that? She gets a little irreverent here. Jesus always took time away in the wilderness to be alone and restore himself, to encounter God. The bad guys in Luke got mad at Jesus because he sat around socializing with his friends. Even the psycho Paul took time to be with friends, and of course being imprisoned helped. So she said to me, I just have to let it rip. So I wasn't going to cut out her comments on the psycho Paul, but I think she would find it funny that I was reading this at a Jesuit university.